Have you ever wondered why the West was so wild? Or what it would really be like living in one of those American frontier towns? How does the Hollywood Western differ from the reality of the American frontier? Who was the most overrated figure of the Old West? Or the most underrated? Who would make the Mount Rushmore of the Wild West? Well, today I'm sitting down with author and historian Mike Martin, and he's going to share his thoughts about all of that and much more. He'll also share some of the hilarious stories he has about his travels here in the United States. You won't want to miss it. Let's get right into it. So tell us, what kind of sparked your interest in the Wild West, and how's that evolved over the course of your lifetime now?
Oh, it's a long story. It goes back a very long way. I'm in the UK, of course, so I think you made that clear, didn't you? I'm in the south of England. In the 1950s, way back in ancient history, I just remember as a child being so impressed by the films and TV series of the time. And because Westerns were particularly popular then, after the Second World War, all through the 50s, all the stars like John Wayne, James Stewart, Henry Fonda, all those guys, great Westerns. So I saw those films in the late 50s. And then from the late 50s into the early 60s, there was a huge glut of American Western TV series, which I'm sure you're aware of. All the
Yes,
things
sir.
like Rawhide, Bonanza, Have Gun Will Travel, Richard Boone, Bronco, Cheyenne, endless series. So we were really subjected to that as kids over here in England. So kids were really into playing cowboys and Indians in those days. That was the big thing, So the thing is, I never grew out of it. I just always, for some reason, it just locked in with me, and I started taking it a lot more seriously. So really, from when I was a pretty young child, I started looking into the truth of the West. And I don't know why. My friends, my family don't understand why. I mean, I love history in general, but for some reason, the Old West of the United States has really connected with me for some reason, and remains to this day.
Yeah,
So,
I think a lot of our viewers can probably relate to that. It's
sure.
interesting. I'm obviously a little bit younger, and I don't understand why I'm so drawn to the Wild West, but there's just something about it. It's such a different period of time, such a unique period.
You actually identify something in particular? I mean, the reason I asked that is because I know a lot of younger Americans, for instance. It was the Young Guns movies that switched them on to Billy the Kid, wasn't it? And that started a new interest in the West after there'd been a bit of a lull in an interest in Western films for a long time. But that started it all up again, didn't it? It seems to me.
Yeah, I know a lot of people I talked to, Young Guns did it for them. I actually grew up, so I don't know, but in the United States here, we had what's called the Westerns channel all the time. And my grandparents kept it on 24/7. So I grew up watching like Gunsmoke and the Clint Eastwood movies and all those. And so, when I was a kid, I thought it was so boring sometimes. I'm not going to lie. Like, because everything's black and white and, I didn't have the attention span for that. But, as I got older, I think it was kind of the nostalgia. I started watching those, and it took me back to being a little kid and being with my grandparents and stuff like that. And so, like you, I started looking into the real history, and it was actually Billy's story that really hooked me. Billy, and another one that I really appreciate is Butch Cassidy. Just some of the things he pulled off and how he was so clever sometimes and stuff. So,
well, the Redford Paul Newman movie '69. I mean, that did it for a lot of people.
Oh,
Butch
yeah.
Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So,
such a great movie.
It's just a fascinating time in history that I don't think there's anything else like it. But in your opinion, how does you mentioned those Westerns you saw growing up. How does what we see portrayed in those Hollywood Westerns, how does it differ than the real history that you started studying and discovering?
Well, pretty hugely, doesn't it? Really. Once again, a long story. The romanticizing of the Old West is all down to Buffalo Bill Cody and his shows, of course, from the late 1800s onwards into the early 1900s. He was the one who, probably more than anyone else, glamorized the view of the cowboy, the Indian, the whole persona of how glamorous it all was. Of course, in reality, it wasn't that glamorous.
Right.
It was a pretty tough time, a pretty grim and boring time, I think, generally for most people living out there. It was a hard life, obviously very lawless, very hard, just trying to eke a living out, keeping warm. So many ways you could die, not usually in gunfights. It was
right.
Starvation, the cold, disease, attacks by wild animals, all sorts of things, with occasional flurries of what could be deemed the glamorization of the West. There were gunfights, of course there were many, but most of them, of course, weren't in the glamorized way they're shown in the Western TV series, with odd exceptions. I mean, a lot of gunplay, but as you know, most of it was very sordid, just guys kicking off when they were drunk in saloons, arguments over women, the few women that there were around, and gambling, just drunken, horrible brawls, really, weren't they? Where people would be firing wildly. Having said that, there were gunfighters, of course there were, but not quite in the way that Hollywood would have had us believe for so long.
Yeah, there weren't exactly a lot of those high noon duels that we see in a lot of the westerns and stuff like that, huh?
No, but there is one particularly famous one that probably started it all off, which I actually start my book with, and that is the famous gunfight between Wild Bill Hickok and Davis Tutt in the Central Square in July 1865, which was a classic. I mean, it's straight from a Hollywood movie, that, isn't it? I mean, Hickok, as you know, I mean, it was an argument over a gambling debt where Tutt took his watch and wouldn't give it back. And Hickok said, "Don't you dare come out into town tomorrow wearing that watch." And of course he did. And so, Bill had took that amazing shot. A lot of people in history call it a lucky shot, but I don't know. It was 75 yards, apparently.
Insane.
Can you imagine how small that target must have been? And they fired simultaneously, and Tutt missed, but drilled him straight through the heart. Now, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? And that's very impressive. What started the idea of the Western duel, but it wasn't usually like that. There were a few exceptions, but that's the one that people base it all on, I think.
Absolutely. So, as you kind of research for your book and everything, tell us about what these Old West towns were really like. Like, we hear about Deadwood, we hear about Tombstone and some of these other, Dodge City and stuff like that. What were, if you were in the 1800s and you were living in one of those towns, what was life kind of like back then?
Well, we can only imagine, can't we? You have to have a vivid imagination, but just think about it. I mean, the sanitation. I mean, why did the towns grow up? They usually grow up around a river, at the end of a railroad stop, perhaps a stagecoach station that expanded. But obviously, like I say, sanitation would be pretty grim. It'd be hard to keep yourself basically healthy and clean.
Yeah.
Food would be an issue. Winters would be hard in most of the West, and summers would be terribly hot. Just an uncomfortable time, really. Having said that, the trail towns, the cowboys would have had several weeks, months on the trail. They'd come to a trail town like Wichita, Abilene, Dodge City later on, and they'd have their money's full of cash, and they'd want to cut loose, and so it would all get pretty wild. So places that had been pretty dull for quite a few months would suddenly go crazy, wouldn't they, with the brothels and the saloons and guys drunkenly shooting each other. Yeah, it must have been a pretty wild time, the Wild West, of course,
Yeah, so why do you think it was so wild back then? Do you think, I hear a lot of people speculate maybe it was, guys had PTSD from the Civil War and stuff like that, or do you think it was just something different?
The Civil War would have played a big part in it. Obviously, that was a massive upheaval in American history, world history, really. It turned the whole nation upside down, as you know. And there were a lot of resentments, obviously, after the Civil War. A lot of guys from the Confederacy really resented what they'd lost and what had been gained in blood. So a lot of ex-soldiers on both sides, but I think particularly the Confederacy came out with a lot of resentment. A lot of them became cowboys because there was not a lot of other employment, really. And when the trail drives became big for a few years after the Civil War, which led to the creation of the cow towns, which we spoke about just now. Yeah, it just created a wild environment, didn't it? For a few years. But of course, as you know, it was only quite a short period of history, really, wasn't it?
Right.
30 years, the Wild West of, classic, imagination was only like the end of the Civil War, 1865, till about 1900 at a push, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Although having said that, it still survived, for quite a few years after that, didn't it? In various other ways.
Absolutely.
And even before the Civil War, I mean, the whole expansion west, that's an interesting period too. But
yeah, no, it absolutely is. So I know you had the opportunity to travel to a lot of these old famous West towns and things like that.
Yeah.
How did they hold up today? How are they what you expected? How are they kind of different from how they were in their wild heydays, I guess?
Well, very different, obviously. But you can still get the flavor of them. The thing is, the famous ones have become very touristy, haven't they? Obviously,
Yeah.
Tombstone, I love, but obviously it's like Disneyland, really, in lots of ways. But you can still very much get the flavor of what it was like. You've only got to go to the outskirts of Tombstone, and you very much get the feel of what it must have been like at the time. Still pretty wild and remote. Where else? Oh, Lincoln, New Mexico, with so many connections with Billy the Kid, of course. That's pretty much as it was, apart from the cars and the telegraph lines and things. But the basic buildings still stand and everything. And I think that was probably about the most authentic one that I visited out of the many places. The one that I felt you really get the feel of what being in Lincoln in 1881 must have been like. 1880. Where else? Well, towns like El Paso, they bear no relation really to the Old West anymore, do they? They're just like big metropolises now. Deadwood's still pretty good, I think, although the Deadwood of Wildness got burned down, but you still very much get the feel of what it must have been like in that gulch and everything,
Yeah, you shared so many great stories in your book about your travels, and one that really stood out to me was I believe it was in Lincoln, the lady who kind of acted as a tour guide for you, and she'd had all these great stories. She'd known Eugenio Salazar, and she'd listened to Fred Coe play,
George
play
Coe.
and things like that. George Coe, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that was fascinating. Yeah, Beverly, her name was Beverly Hammond. And I've asked a lot of American friends since, ones who live in the area, if they remember her, and nobody seems to. I mean, we're talking about, it was over 20 years ago when I met her. She was in her 80s then, and just going around Lincoln and drinking in all the atmosphere and loving it and everything. And I just came across this old lady. She wasn't an actual Lincoln County Ward tour guide. She was actually looking after this old house that had belonged to a doctor. And just talking to her, she suddenly came up with, I knew a lot of the people who knew Billy. Really? That was like really being in touch, like living history, wasn't it? Yeah. And like I say, she remembers as a little girl being at parties where Uncle George, that was George Coe, of course, which any Western aficionado, they'll know about the Coe brothers in the Lincoln County War. And she remembers him playing the fiddle and everyone dancing and, being on his knee when she was a little girl. And she told one story about how he went on too long with the fiddle and somebody got a knife and cut the strings while he was playing. Yeah.
I remember when you mentioned the fiddle story, you mentioned that he must have calmed down a lot from his regulator days because he kind of let it slide.
I think so. but his brother, the other co-brother, he was quite elderly when he killed his last man, and it was his daughter's boyfriend shot him
Oh, wow.
when he was an old man, and he got away with it somehow. But that was pretty amazing. You don't mess with the regulators.
Yeah. Well, I read that not all of the towns were as friendly as Lincoln to you. I remember reading the story about the old timer you encountered who was not so friendly to let you
Oh yeah,
look
now where
around. I'm
was
trying
it?
to remember where that was. That was
That
at
was one of the forts, wasn't it? I drove miles to find that. God, what was it? It was one of the cavalry forts because I visited so many, but it was in the middle of nowhere, and I was really looking forward to seeing this place. And I finally got there, and I suppose it was about coming up to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I ran up, and there's just this old guy sitting there, and I said, "Oh, nope, you can't come in." I said, "What?" He said, "We're closing." I said, "Please, my friend, I just want to have a quick look round." I said, "It's only like 20 to 4 or something." He just wouldn't have it. And I said, "I've come all the way from England. I want to see these places. Please, just let me in for 20 minutes. No, rules is rules," he said. And that was it. So I just had to walk around the outside. But generally speaking, I must say, because I visited all these Western places over a period of several years, and may I say that was an exception. As a rule, wherever I went, people were warm, friendly, helpful, and yeah, it was mainly a lovely experience all
That's
those
great.
years.
That's good stuff. Well, kind of circling back to the Wild West era. Do you think it was really often good versus bad, or do you think there was maybe more of a gray area that most men lived in? I mean, it seemed like a lot of times a guy could be an outlaw in one territory and then ride to the next and put on a badge. You think that was kind of
Oh,
common?
yes, I think so. You look at the history of just taking the Lincoln County War as an example. I mean, most of the participants in the Lincoln County War, good and bad, they'd worn a badge at some time, even outside of the Lincoln County War, and continued to do so afterwards and before. I mean, guys like Bob Ollinger, of course, who Billy famously killed when he escaped. I mean, he was a real bad dude. Terrible man, terrible bully, it seems. And, he'd worn a badge. So both sides of the law, really. That's just an example. There were loads of them. Henry Brown, people like that who've been a regulator. I mean, in between periods as a deputy marshal or a marshal, he was robbing banks. It was whatever suited them at the time. And of course, communications being so scant, you could disappear, couldn't you?
Yeah. Create a whole new alias and no one would know who you were.
Quite. Yeah, that was how the outlaw period thrived for so long. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to have a little fun and kind of do like a little a rapid fire and kind of pick your brain and
Right.
get your opinion on some things here. In your opinion, who's the most underrated figure of the Wild West?
Oh, there's quite a few. I think Bill Tilghman, the lawman, Bill Tilghman. I don't think he gets as much glory as he deserves. I mean, he was around right from the Dodge City days and before, with Earp. He was an Indian fighter, a marshal, very successful one, and his career carried on right into the 1900s. And he was actually killed by a corrupt prohibition agent when he was age 70, in 1920. You look at the story of Bill Tilghman, and I think there should be a lot more recognition of him. For instance, guys like the outlaw Harry Tracy. Do you know of Harry Tracy at all? Who was holding the Wall Gang a while bunch, but I mean
Yeah, I've definitely heard the
was
name and read about him a little bit. I think when I read about the Wild Bunch, but I'm not as familiar as I should be.
Well, you look at his story. I mean, I think he was a pretty nasty character, but if you're talking about courage and exploits and the amount of men he actually gunned down, it's quite impressive, for want of a better word. So there was a movie about Harry Tracy years ago with Bruce Dern, great Western actor, but it was very inaccurate, sadly, and it was a classic case, which I often feel sad. When they do these movies and series about Western figures, I never understand why they have to be so inaccurate so often. I mean, take the the series on Billy the Kid.
I was just about to ask you about that. Yeah.
Well, Tom Blythe, he's a great actor. But I just think he's ridiculously miscast. He's just not Billy at all. Billy was all accounts of him were that he was gregarious, a good dancer, great humor, always smiling. I mean, Tom Blythe is not that, is he, at all?
Yeah. When I first saw the series, I took some exceptions to it because I thought Tom was too tall, for one thing.
Oh, as well. Much too
tall. Probably a little too good looking, a little too much. And he's always brooding. He's never really. I don't remember seeing him joke around one time in the series.
No, but, and that's just not Billy. So that was my main problem with it, apart from the fact that, historically it was all over the place.
Right.
And it didn't have to be, Nick, did it? Because the actual story of Billy, if you just kept to the known facts, the things that are historically accepted, that alone would make a great miniseries. You wouldn't have to deviate from that at all. But for some reason they choose to. It mystifies me.
I don't get it either. And I try to defend the show more than most because I enjoyed it once I got past kind of the historical inaccuracies and stuff. But the more I kind of go back and look at it, I'm like, you're right. There's a lot of things they didn't need to do differently that they did.
No. Maybe the thing is they have to hang the name Billy the Kid on it, I suppose, for attention. But if it was just a Western series, then fine. I'd have no problem with it, But it's sad that they do that.
I agree.
And that's what they usually do, sadly, isn't it?
Yeah.
There was I mentioned it in the book that I had high hopes for what I thought was going to be the definitive Billy the Kid film. Do you know the young Irish actor called Barry Keoghan?
I saw that in your book. I didn't get to look into it.
Yeah. Well, he's about 4 years ago. It came out that that he was very interested in portraying Billy the Kid, and he wanted it to be the definitive film. I mean, he even looks like him, from the one picture we've got.
Yeah.
And he said he'd always been fascinated by Billy the Kid as a child, and that seemed to be about to go into production. But for some sad reason, it seems to have disappeared. And he's made about 8 films since he said he was going to do that. So I think he's a bit too old to do it now.
Yeah,
Billy was only 21, of course.
Man, that's a shame. It would have been nice to finally get something.
In the film, I think that would have been it. But maybe they'll do it yet. They'll find the right guy. I hope so.
I hope so too. So, kind of on the other side of the coin, who's your most overrated figure from the Old West? Who do you think gets a little too much attention? A little too, maybe their story's been overblown, something like that.
Well, I hesitate to say this really because I've actually got a lot of time for this guy because he's largely the reason why we're talking about all this, as I said at the beginning. But Buffalo Bill, Cody, the thing is he's a bit of a paradigm really because he's paradox. Sorry, that he was certainly around at the time. I mean, apparently he was a Pony Express rider when he was about 15. He was around during the Civil War. He was a buffalo hunter. He was a scout for the army, and it is recorded that he killed the Cheyenne chief Yellow Hair or Yellow Hand, and said the first scalp for Custer. Famous story that he shot him from a distance and then scalped him and waved the first scalp for Custer. But then he went on to do all his Wild West shows, which of course, and he became an enormous star, and he's still remembered to this day. But and of course, he's responsible for the Wild West that we know today, the romantic side of it. Yeah. But in the sense of overrated for what he actually did exploit-wise. You know, I mean, he was his own best publicity agent, wasn't he?
He was.
He was in show business, you know.
Yeah.
He would put on his Western shows, and then he'd go back in the summer and scout for the army again for a while. So he was there, you know, but not quite the exploits that he and history would have us believe.
Yeah, I like that pick. That's a good one. Who would you say is probably the most dangerous man from that era?
Well, once again, it's a job to pick them, isn't it? But
Yeah,
I would say they didn't come much more dangerous than gunfighters like Clay Allison and Wes Hardin.
Yeah.
Although Wes Hardin spent about 20 years in jail before he came out and was shot himself finally in El Paso. Ben Thompson, who was English born, apparently, born over here in Yorkshire, they say, and went over and became a born again Texan. And he had a hell of a career. Civil War in the Confederacy, I believe. After the Civil War, he fought for Emperor Maximilian, or against Emperor Maximilian in the Wyatt Rebellion and everything, and then went on to become a lawman, an outlaw, gambler, and a renowned gunfighter. But you know, these are guys you don't really hear that much of.
You're right.
While Bill Longley, Manning Clements, there's so many of them. You know, but it's the movies that made the ones we know, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a question of whether you've had the movies and TV series made about you, really, I guess.
You're absolutely
in the
right.
case of Wyatt Earp, you know, it was once again, he unlike most of his contemporaries, he lived into old age.
Yeah.
And actually became an advisor on Western movies in the early silent period, and met John Ford, the director, and all that. I mean, it's amazing to think about, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. But you're right. It's often a lot of people don't realize how dangerous some of these guys were because they only know, you know, Wyatt Earp's reputation is huge from all the movies made about him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
When in comparison, you know, he wasn't nearly the gunfighter a lot of these other guys were, you know.
Well, that's very true. Before the OK Corral, it seems that he never shot anybody before the OK Corral. It's the possibility that he shot a fleeing cowboy.
Yeah.
In when a bunch of cowboys were hurrahing the town in Wichita, I think it was, maybe Dodge, I think, and they were riding out of town, and they'd shot up the street, and a crowd of them were riding out of town, and Wyatt and several others chased out after them onto the street and opened up on them. So one of them was shot out of the saddle. Now, whether or not it was Wyatt's bullet that knocked him out of the saddle, we don't know. But that's the only recorded instance of Wyatt actually shooting anybody before the OK Corral.
Right.
But he was obviously a very hard guy because he used to do the buffaloing. You know, he'd knock them out with a gun barrel, wouldn't they? Pistol whipping.
Yeah.
And he was a very tough guy, Wyatt, apparently, all the way through. And then, of course, after the OK Corral, there's a few instances. You know, he probably killed Curly Bill Brocious in that gunfight. Indian Charlie, Frank Stillwell, of course, the Vengeance Ride, and even into old age, he was still pulling guns on people in the early 1900s. You know, so his reputation alone got him through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of reputation, which town from that era do you think was the most dangerous?
Well, once again, so many, but from what you can surmise, I would think maybe Hays City, Kansas, in the late 1860s, where Wild Bill Hickok became marshal for a while. That, by all accounts, was a particularly tough place to hang out. It was a railroad town initially, and of course you had Fort Hays nearby. So it was full of drunken, sex-starved cavalry troopers who didn't have much else to do than cause trouble and fight each other and whoever else was around, like the buffalo hunters and the gamblers and the brothels exploiting them. It was just a pretty wild environment, wasn't it? So
Yeah.
I think Hay City is probably a good example of a really tough town. Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that one. What do you think was maybe the and this might be one that Wild Bill is involved in. I'm curious what your opinion is on this one. What do you think is the most exaggerated gunfight?
I would say probably, and there are others, but just once again as an example, the 1861 Rock Creek gunfight that took place between Wild Bill Hickok and a couple of employees from the stage station and Dave McCanley's and his family and helpers. Yeah, I mean that was blown completely out of proportion, and it was the conflict that actually put Wild Bill on the map, really. But eventually, as you know, when Colonel Nichols interviewed him in 1867, and the article went into Harper's Weekly and was ridiculously exaggerated, where Wild Bill is supposed to have killed, what was it, 12 desperados of the McCandless gang and emerged with 20 gunshot wounds and his scalp hanging off and all this. But the reality of it, you know, when you do really study it, it was pretty sordid, actually. It was just Dave McCanley's wanted the stage stay. He was owed money on the buildings that he'd sold, and he wanted his money, basically. So he had a point. And the owners of the stage station, they weren't paying up, basically, because they had financial problems. And McCandless eventually turned up and demanded the money, and obviously the guns came out. McCandless was shot dead at the doorstep. His 12-year-old son saw him shot dead. The wife of the owner of the stage station actually said to Hickok, kill him as well, kill the boy, but he wouldn't.
Right.
There were two others there, James, who was it, James Woods and somebody else, who were just employees, and they basically ran away and they got chased into the woods and killed.
Wow.
One of them was chopped to death with a hoe. And the other one was killed with a shotgun while he was begging for his life, apparently. So that was the reality of that gunfight. And of course, it was just blown completely out of proportion in that Harper's Weekly article when Colonel Nichols portrayed Hickok as some kind of Superman, you know. And
yeah, I'm sure Bill didn't mind too much.
Yeah, no. Well, the thing is, Hickok, he was a very genuine figure. He was a crack shot, and you look at his history, even the stuff that we know is true, it was pretty impressive. He was one of the ones who did actually do quite a lot, and he was such a flamboyant, incredible, colourful figure anyway. But as you say, he wasn't frightened of being his best fan.
Right.
He knew how to spin a yarn.
Yes, he did.
And when one of the interviews he had with Stanley, the English explorer, and he said, "How many men have you killed, Bill?" And he said, "What is that counting Mexicans and Indians?" Oh dear, you know.
Oh man.
Yeah,
he was a character.
He was. He certainly was.
So, who would you say is the most romanticized outlaw today?
The most romanticized. Ooh. Well, I guess, you know, even to this day, Jesse James, I guess, probably too romanticized. You know, he was a victim of his time and his circumstances, came out of the Civil War, the whole, border ruffians war, the Red Legs and all that. He rode with Quantrell when he was a teenager and all that. He had a very rough kind of grounding, didn't he?
Yeah.
And of course, one of those ones who came out of the Confederacy with his brother and his cousins, the Youngers, and they had a great resentment against having lost the war. and the railroads, the way they were exploiting people, and things that were done to his family. But basically, he was an outlaw. He wasn't Robin Hood. He was very popular with all his family up in the hills in Missouri and all that, But I think he's probably been too romanticized.
That would be the one I would have said as well. And you answered my question. Was he more Robin Hood or just an outlaw that had good PR? And I tend to lead he had a lot of good PR.
I think the second explanation. I think that's it. But his family loved him.
Yeah, and he still, I mean, to this day, I get a lot of comments. One of the most, if I do a Jesse James short, something like that, there's a lot of people who really still romanticize Jesse and really think he was the South's Robin Hood and all that to this day.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that came from, there was actually a very good movie with Tyrone Power and Henry Fonda in the late 1930s. That was one of the ones that spurred my interest. The story of Jesse James. And a lot of it is actually quite accurate, the actual basic facts, but basically it portrays him as a real angel.
Yeah.
Which he wasn't, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you might have already answered this next one, but I'll still throw it out there. Who do you believe is the most underappreciated lawman from that time?
Well, Bill Tilghman, who we've already talked about, and Bass Reeves. There's been a very good series about him recently. Have you seen that at all?
I have, yeah. And I actually had the
accurate.
opportunity to sit down with Art Burton recently and talk about Bass and everything. And it's great to see Bass's, him finally starting to get his due and everything, because it's a pretty remarkable career.
Oh God, yeah, wasn't it? Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, amazing career. And that series, I mean, with certain exceptions, which were a bit over the top, but it was pretty accurate, wasn't it? Pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, definitely more so than the Billy series, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, that was pure fantasy, wasn't
it? They definitely took some liberties with certain things like the trial and different things like that. But overall, for anytime it's with Hollywood, there's going to be some deviations and things like that. It's just.
And why?
Yeah. I don't know. Like, if any story is entertaining enough, I think it's Bass Reeves, without having to change anything.
Definitely. I mean, there was, Wild Bill Hickok, there's been a few stabs at portraying him on film, and the Gary Cooper one called The Plainsman in the 30s. That was one of the ones that I loved when I was a kid, because I love Gary Cooper, but not an accurate portrayal of Hickok, of course. The series Deadwood, was, I mean, they took a lot of liberties with the fact, but it had a very gritty, realistic feel. I think the language was not of the day. I don't think they used that kind of language in the 80s.
Who's there, goddammit? What the hell does it look like? How the fuck do I know who it fucking looks like? It's dark.
But you can kind of see why they did it. In fact, I read an interview with the directors, a couple of the directors and the producer, David Milch, and he was saying, we tried to make it accurate, that they would kind of been saying, God darn it, and tarnation and things like that. It just sounded ridiculous. So they used all that very, very colorful language to kind of, just for a modern audience, to make you realize how rough and gritty it was.
And it worked, because Deadwood has a very loyal following to this day. That show has a huge fan base where people quote it all the time, especially some of the Al Swearingen lines and stuff like that.
Oh, the dope that you were gonna fucking sell to me? White cocksucker. These two white cocksuckers? Who the fuck did it?
It was beautifully written. It was like an American Shakespeare. I thought the dialogue was incredible, from Swearingen and all that, and the humor in it and everything. It was just a wonderful series, and the portrayal of Hickok was pretty realistic, from Keith Carradine, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He died very early on, of course, in it. And of course, most of the characters in it are based on lesser known Western characters, and once again, really exaggerated, but beautifully done. It had a beautiful feel to it, and that's probably in many ways the most important thing is when a drama has a very authentic feel, and that's certainly a very authentic feel. Likewise, I don't know if you're familiar with the Walter Hill film Wild Bill about Hickok with Jeff Bridges plays Hickok. It's quite old now, but I would say that Jeff Bridges is by far the best, most authentic Hickok so far. I just think, the look of him and the way he portrays him, I think he's almost perfect, how I would imagine Wild Bill. And certain sections of that film are superb. But once again, for some reason, they just go right over the top with some of the stuff. And it just saddens me,
Yeah, it's wild how they do that, but I agree. I thought Bridges had a really good portrayal of Wild Bill. Absolutely.
And once again, although I'm an enormous John Wayne fan and I love True Grit, the Wayne, I must say the remake of True Grit with Jeff Bridges, I thought that really nailed it. I thought he was superb, and it's much closer to the book, the Charles Portis book as well. I thought Jeff Bridges was a superb Rooster Coven. Fantastic.
Absolutely. That's one of my I really enjoy the modern, the newer True Grit. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, definitely.
Who would you say, in your opinion, was the smartest outlaw from the era?
Probably Butch Cassidy. He seemed to be have his head screwed on, didn't he? He was a smart guy, I think, and by all accounts, very affable.
Yeah. He got out of a lot of trouble because of his personality.
Absolutely. Yeah. That does seem to be the case.
And the relay system that he had with the horses and stuff after the robberies all set up. I mean, it was ahead of his time. He even had his own postal system. I remember, like, through the saloons and things like that, where he could get correspondence to people without, the pictures and stuff getting it. I mean, it's pretty fascinating guy.
Oh God, yeah. And of course, all those rumors that he survived, Bolivia. I mean, his sister claimed, didn't she, that he came back to visit her, but I don't know. I think they went in Bolivia myself.
Yeah, I think they pushed it a little too far,
Yeah.
Just couldn't stay away from that lifestyle. They had a good thing going there, and they just couldn't stay away.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's what so many were facing at that time. Where were they going to go? The outlaw, with the old West dying, and they were all pushed into a corner. What else were they going to do?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, and it was a lot less. I want to say, I don't know if it was less work, but it was definitely a lot more money, and probably just not about the same lifestyle being a bank robber than being a cowboy. Because being a cowboy was a tough life, and you barely got paid anything. So I think that's why so many resorted to crime.
Well, yeah, exactly, and I think at the end of a cattle drive, when they did have money in their pocket, I think most of them didn't hang on to it for very long.
Right.
When they hit town, the first thing they do is ditch all their trail clothes and go and have a shower and a haircut and a shave, and buy themselves a suit and maybe a top hat. I mean, that's something that you don't see portrayed in Western films, really, as a rule, is it? The fact they all, as a rule, would all dress up. They'd buy a suit and a top hat or a derby hat or something, and they wanted to go out on the town. And
absolutely. Well, you kind of mentioned the rumor that maybe Butch and Sundance survived in Bolivia, and that kind of goes along with a bunch of the myths we hear, like them surviving and Brushy Bill and things like that. What if you could erase one Wild West myth forever? Which one would it be?
Well, I think you've just touched on it. Brushy Bill Roberts. That really annoys me, and I'm not alone. And the thing is, when you say something like that, you make a lot of enemies, and it's usually from people who actually don't really know that much. They just think they do. But if you do take the trouble to actually look at the existing historical records, I mean, the Brushy Bill thing is just blown wide open. I mean, the date of his birth, his family, everything. You know, the guy was just just a complete fantasist.
Yeah.
I mean, he claimed to be other historical figures too. Or even his own family said he was full of bullshit, literally. But I don't know if you're aware of the Donald Klein book, are you, about Brushy Bill Roberts? I mean, if you're serious about wanting to know the almost certain truth, get that Donald Klein book, because he spent years just completely demolishing these ridiculous theories. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on all day.
It's just proof. Yeah, I know. It's just proof people are going to believe whatever they want to believe, and they'll find a way to make it seem real to them. You know,
It's still real to me, damn it.
we'll get comments on this video about Brushy Bill. It never fails.
Well, it's just mischief making. I mean, you know, you're Josh Slatton, of course, in Jamestown, and you know they've got wonderful sites, and they really are serious and do wonderful work, and they really put their money where their mouth is, you know, with their research, and then they get these ridiculous comments, you know. Brushy Bill was Billy. Oh yeah, right. Okay. Now, would you kind of like to substantiate that? And they actually can't, you know, at all. You know, it's just nonsense.
I agree,
and it's tiresome. And the problem is, Nick, is well, once again, a double-edged sword, because of course Young Guns 2 was so popular and great movies. I love the Young Guns movies, and tip my hat to the way it started people off into Wild West interest again. But you know, they took the Brushy Bill line, didn't they? And that started a lot of people off. And the problem is this new one, Young Guns 3, I mean, that's taking it even further. So we're going to have a whole new generation of people now absolutely convinced that Brushy Bill was Billy the Kid. And
it's I mean, I often say any exposure to the Wild West is good because it gets new eyes on the era, but then it gets to a point where I'm like, I don't know, you know. I mean, there's people working so hard to get the correct information out there about Billy, and then when more stuff like that comes in, it just makes it so difficult for the guys who are doing the real work, you know.
Of course. Well, we owe it to history. I mean, you know, people like us, you know, we've got a great respect for history. There are people who say history, what does it matter? Well, you know, I'm not going to gel with people like that. History is important because it's why we're here today. And I think we all owe it to our past to know where we've come from. But yeah, the Billy the Kid, Wild Bill Hickok, Wyatt, Earp, my three subjects of that book. Basically, they were just people, weren't they? And there were people in the West who, without a doubt, did a hell of a lot more than they did, but they've become the symbols.
Yeah,
and they deserve respect.
Yeah,
and the respect comes from us just taking on board what we do know and finding out exactly what we can know, not just listening to stupid hearsay and unsubstantiated theories, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I think Billy would be quite tickled if he knew just how much people are still talking about him all these years later, you know.
Wouldn't he just, eh? Yeah, that's the last thing he would have expected. I think he'd have found it very amusing, actually. He was he was a good-humored guy. And you know, once again, there's a lot of criticism about Billy, you know, face-to-face gunfights. Well, he certainly saw a lot of gunplay.
Yeah,
definitely. But all this thing about 21 men that he killed, one for each year of his life, that just came from later books, you know.
Right.
But you know, it shouldn't be about a tally of how many people you've killed. You know?
Yeah, right. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
If that was the case,
he was certainly in the forefront of all
Yeah.
the main conflicts of the Lincoln County War. So he probably put bullets through more people than we can prove,
for sure.
for what it's worth.
Well, I think this next question will be a good one. Who do you feel like is the most tragic Wild West figure?
Well, once again, I can't think of a better example than Billy the Kid.
I
Really,
agree.
I think he was ultimately tragic,
Yeah.
mainly because of his youth.
Mhm.
I mean, he was exceptionally young and sad, and he was a victim of circumstance. I mean, he wasn't a bank robber. I don't think there was anything evil about him. On the contrary, we've got endless accounts of basically what a nice guy he was.
Yeah.
People liked him. You know, he had his enemies, of course, but you know, generally you get right into the 1930s with people who still remembered him. Paulita Maxwell and Delavina, all these people, the Coes again, you know, and they all only had good things to say about him. Even Pat Garrett had an affinity with him.
Yeah.
So and I just think it's tragic. He probably would have been able to get away and survive maybe into old age, but he felt that he couldn't leave Fort Sumner.
Mhm.
A lot of people couldn't understand after his escape. They all said, you know, well, obviously Fort Sumner is the place they'll be looking for him, and that was true. Of course, he was protected by the local populace because he was so popular, and I guess he thought he was going to get away with it forever.
Yeah. You asked me
But if he
earlier.
was going to go south to Mexico or something, what would he have done? You know,
Yeah. Nah,
he
I
would
just
have
can't
had
imagine
to.
him. Well, you asked me earlier what kind of sparked my interest in the Wild West, and I mentioned
Yeah,
it's Billy. It was the tragedy of Billy's story, just
yeah,
being orphaned at such a young age, you know, losing his mother,
yeah.
and he kind of had to resort to crime just to survive, you
Of
know.
course.
Um, and by all accounts, he was a really good kid.
Yeah,
The way he embraced the Hispano population when so many other, you know, Anglos didn't at the
yeah,
time, and just, you know, it seemed like there was so many times like when he met Tunstall, it seemed like he was about to go on the straight and narrow, you know, and he wanted to buy a ranch and
yeah.
all those things
With Fred Waite, the two of them were
yeah,
good boys, weren't they?
exactly. And it's like if this kid could have just caught a break, you know,
Yeah,
I really believe. And then even like you mentioned, him not wanting to leave Fort Sumner. Well, I feel like that's where his people were, you know, and
exactly.
for a kid that grew up an orphan, you know, like it seemed like he didn't want to be on his own again. You know, he
Yeah,
wanted to be around his people and
yeah.
everything. And
That was his new family. Of course, you know, as you say, he was fluent in Spanish, absolutely
yeah,
fluent. He understood the whole Hispanic culture. They were his new family, and they all loved him, didn't they? I mean, that
yeah,
was how he kept out of trouble for so long. Really, I mean, he could always find a meal and a cup of coffee and a bedroll at these sheep camps and things. They all loved him. They wanted to look after him. Most of
yeah.
them,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think so. I think you nailed it. I think he's definitely, in my opinion, the most tragic figure as
Yeah.
well. Well, this next one should be a fun one. This is one that I've thought about for a long time, and I've always wanted to kind of ask somebody if you were to do like a Mount Rushmore of the Wild West, the you know the four most important figures of the Wild West, who would go up there for you?
What, four? Four of them.
Yeah,
It's a Wild West Mount Rushmore.
yes, sir.
Well, I mean, I'd have to have my three from the book. Obviously, with Billy the Kid, Wild Bill, and Wyatt, for sure. The fourth one. Now, this might be controversial. I think I'd have George Armstrong Custer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's another Western book I've got, by the way, From Crockett to Custer, all about the Alamo and the Little Bighorn.
Yeah,
But I think Custer as he's so symbolic, he's so iconic. Whatever you think of Custer, and once again, I think he's had some uh, not exactly. What word am I looking for? I think he's had a bit of a bad press. Now, a lot of people would say that he really deserves it. In many ways, perhaps he did. But if you actually look into the story of Custer, he made mistakes, but don't forget, he had a huge, long career from the Civil War all through the Plains Indian Wars, right to the end. He was successful, except for that final day.
Yeah.
And he made mistakes, which I think a lot of other cavalry officers would have done. He did have a huge ego. He was ambitious, but his courage was never in question. In the Civil War, he had 8 horses shot from under him. He always led from the front, and that carried on right to the end. He was known as hard ass by his men because he was hard. He was hard, but he wouldn't do anything that he wouldn't expect his men to do anything that he wouldn't do. So yeah, I mean, as an iconic figure who I think deserves to be up there, I would say Custer myself.
That's a phenomenal answer. I love that, because I would have never guessed that. That's really good. That's really good. Well, I know I've taken up a lot of your time, but I can't let you go without asking you about one more story from your book, and that's about the police officer who pulled you over in Arizona. Can you share that story? Do you remember the one I'm talking about?
Well, it did happen a couple of times.
Okay, I was talking about the one that resembled Penelope Cruz, I think.
Oh yeah. How could I forget that? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was in a hired car, obviously, and I'd come from Tombstone, and it was sort of very late afternoon, and I'd driven to Tucson, and I thought, because I wanted to, they've got that old movie town there that they used in a lot of westerns, and I wanted to try and get to that just before it closed. And I don't know what I did. I came off the freeway wrongly or something, without yielding or something. I don't know. Anyway, flashing lights pulled me over, and this absolutely gorgeous police officer, I mean, I swear it was Penelope Cruz, on their day off, and absolutely gorgeous. And sir, are you aware that you didn't yield when you came off the freeway? And I'm really sorry, I wasn't aware. And I'm just mesmerized by this beautiful looking police officer. And I always remember it was like, for somebody from England, it's like it's like a stereotype, because she actually had her hand on her gun, the whole time she's talking to me, in this very tight police uniform. And she suddenly gets something on the radio. She said, "Well, you drive carefully." She said, I've got to go now. I've got to go to a shooting." And I thought, you're in the States, and this beautiful police officer, she might have given me a ticket if she had been called away to a shooting.
Oh man, that story had me rolling. That was great. And then he said, "I wonder if all
only it was always
police
like
officers look like this in the United States."
That was great. Just one of the questions that was on your list was, what Western town would I have liked to have lived in?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, from what we know, I would say when it was at its peak and when it had become a proper thriving metropolis, I would say Tombstone. In the Earp period, about 1880, because the city had really expanded. It wasn't just all crazy cowpunchers and gamblers and brothels. That was like one side of town, but there was a hell of a lot of sophistication in Tombstone, where they were getting proper lighting, proper sanitation. They had an opera house, they had an oyster bar, they had an ice cream parlor. I mean, you don't think of these things in the Old West, do you? But there was a real sophistication about Tombstone for quite a long time, until the silver mines ran out, So I think as long as you weren't involved in the troubles between the Earps and the McClarys and Clantons, I think it was probably quite a nice place to live, really, if you stayed on the outside of town.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great answer. Well, another question that I had also was, why do you think the Wild West ended? Do you think it was like the expansion of the railroads, the telegraphs, or just a combination of different things?
Combination of different things. The two things you mentioned there were a huge factor. Also, I mean, just the more and more immigrants, people pushing into the West, cities were being established, communications, roads, the railroads, as you say, the telegraph. What made the West wild was the lawlessness. And obviously, as time went on, the law became more established. It was harder and harder for the outlaws. The cattle drives all ended because of the railroads. The battles with the Native Americans, they all ended by the 1890s. You know, the Apaches and Geronimo were the last holdouts. Yeah, so all those things were just gradually driven away. The Native Americans were all pushed onto reservations. They couldn't fight anymore. You know, it was all those things, just civilization, passing time, electricity, you know.
Yeah.
But it did sort of lumber on, sort of, until the 1920s, really. I'd say that's when Bill Tilghman was killed by the gun. And then for a while, you had a new era of outlaws, didn't you? Because that was the time of all the machine guns and sedan, Pone, and all that. So that was a new outlawry for a while. Pretty Boy Floyd, Babyface Nelson, Dillinger. Yeah. So Bonnie and Clyde.
It's a whole nother fascinating era right there in American history.
Yeah, that is fascinating in its own right. Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned you've been a student of the Wild West and a fan of Westerns for many decades now. And how have you seen the perception of the West kind of change over the course of your lifetime?
As I said at the beginning of the interview, it was as a child. It's hard to imagine it now unless you were actually there at the time. But Western films were probably the biggest thing for childhood in the late 50s, early 60s. It was massive. And, you know, kids didn't have internet and video games and all that. So it was a massive thing. The Western films carried on in popularity till late 60s, early 70s, and they started to wane. That's when like all the cop movies and Star Wars and all that all started to take over. So obviously the interest in the Old West did wane. I'm certainly talking about over in England anyway. I'm assuming it was we're in the States. So, but then you had a bit of a reboot with the spaghetti westerns, which helped, you know, when they started, you know, having the anti-hero, and that was a whole thing. Clint Eastwood, he kept it alive for a while.
Yeah,
did some great movies.
He's got some great ones.
Then you had pretty long, desolate period where not really any westerns were being made, not any of that made any real impact anyway. Except the ones that made a political statement, like say Soldier Blue, you know, which was like an allegory of Vietnam and all that, wasn't it? And Me Lai, and so so then you had quite a long period where westerns were kind of dirty, gritty. They were supposed to be more realistic, but they went too much the other way. I remember a particularly appalling version of Billy the Kid story called Dirty Little Billy. I don't know if
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, don't bother. So, and you had a film called Doc, which was supposed to be the truth about the OK Corral, and it was Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp, and they were inferring that they had a gay relationship. You know,
oh wow,
where did that come from? You know. So anyway, the point of what you were saying, so we had a long period where westerns basically died to death, but then they started to come back with Clint, Unforgiven, brilliant. That helped
Tombstone,
Young Guns, of course, did a hell of a lot to help. And Lonesome Dove, the series, brilliant. I mean, Robert Duvall, who we've just lost. I mean, isn't he the archetypal, most brilliant Western character ever, isn't he? Gus McCrae, superb. And the book's fantastic as well. And then there was another Western film that always annoyed me, although I enjoyed it, Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman.
Oh, yeah.
Because the book is fantastic. I love the Thomas Berger book, but there's the most ridiculous portrayal of Custer in it. But I enjoyed the film anyway, just the elements that because it was trying to make a political statement about Vietnam at the time. That was the thing, which so many films did. Anyway, coming right round to the modern day, you mentioned in your notes to me about Red Dead Redemption, the video game. Obviously, that's done a lot to increase interest. I mean, my two sons, they love that game. I haven't played it, but I've seen them playing it. It looks pretty good to me. Yeah, it's great. So that all helps.
Yeah.
The new Young Guns film, even though it's going to be absolute nonsense, it will be very entertaining, and it will instigate a great new interest in the West.
Yeah.
And what others? Yeah, there's been what's that series Primeval about Jim Bridger and the Mormons and everything. Do you know that series?
I haven't seen that one yet. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Oh, recommended. It's good.
Yeah,
it's very good. It's very savage, but it's very good. Primeval, it's called.
Yeah.
It's all about the 1840s with Brigham Young, Jim Bridger, and all that. It's
nice.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
So, in answer to your question, I guess as long as they keep coming up with good movies and good series, and people revisit the old ones, the good ones, I would like to feel that it can last. Perhaps the whole period of the Old West should be more of a subject for schools. I mean, I don't know how that is in the States. They don't touch it at all.
Really not. I asked my kids about it. My kids are both, my son's in high school, my daughter's in middle school, and they really don't know. They don't talk much about the Old West at all. I'm really surprised by that.
Well, I mean, it's such an important part of your history, apart from world history. I mean, American history. I think it's obviously they cover the Civil War, don't they? Must be that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
More of independence, but I would think that period of the Old West, the expansion westwards and everything, and the trials and tribulations of that, I would think that's pretty essential. How strange. It was a unique period. I mean, history is living all the time, isn't it? I mean, you can't hone into all of it. I mean, like I say, I love history in general, and I've got certain periods that really fascinate me, but none more so than the old American West. That is my top one. Always has been, probably always will be, and I will be coming back to continue my research into the West. I've got a lot of places I want to see yet.
Oh, I can't wait. That's great. You have to keep us updated on where you're planning to visit and all that stuff. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Share your experiences too, because I'm telling you, folks, if you get a chance to go out and pick up his book, Wild Billy Earp, you will not be disappointed. Even if you think you know the history of these three gentlemen on the cover, the stories about his experiences here in the United States, we touched on a couple of them, but it didn't even scratch the surface. Just so entertaining and so insightful. I absolutely loved it.
Well, but as I say in the preface to the book, which is pretty obvious, I'm not claiming to come up with anything new about these people. I'm not an expert. I'm knowledgeable, and I'm fascinated, and always will be. I find out everything I can. But my book, the whole point of it, it's not supposed to be a new textbook for the initiated. I mean, obviously, it's people who've got a deep interest in the American West. There's probably nothing new in it for them, but I've definitely written it from my own angle. And it is for people coming to the West for the first time. I'd like to feel that it's as accurate as I could possibly make it. And it's the basics. It's, I mean, James Townsend, Josh, Mel Hubner, all these people, they very kindly said it's the perfect introduction to the Old West. So I would like to feel that people come into the subject for the first time, I would stir their interest for them to find out more. And like I say, my travels being in there, that's my angle, really, that I've, how things are now compared to how they were then. And, with the odd amusing story like getting pulled over by Penelope Cruz. If only. Yeah.
It's great stuff. Well, I agree with James and Mel. It is a great introduction to the Wild West. And
that was my intention.
Yeah, it's a great angle that you took on it. It's a phenomenal read. The way you tell the stories and everything, and
Thank you.
is there anything? Do you have any other projects as far as Wild West goes in the future, other than just your travels here, or anything else coming up?
I'm always full of ideas. I've so many notes, and so I've got a few things I'm working on. Not just Western Wild West things, but the Wild West is still up there, and I've not done yet. There's plenty in me still to spill out, and I
Great.
will keep you informed. Oh, and just one other thing. It is a question that I thought was a very interesting question. You said, "What did I feel was the most accurate
Yes.
film?"
Yep.
And I don't think there's anything better or more accurate at the moment than the Brad Pitt film, The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford. I a lot of people found it really boring, but I loved it because
Hmm.
I thought so much attention to detail had gone into
Yeah.
the film. And I would say it's over 90% as accurate as it could be from the point of view of factually, and just the look and the feel of the thing. I
Yep.
think Brad Pitt's performance as Jesse James is great, very accurate, the whole thing. So that was my answer to that question.
No, yeah, that's a good
And
one.
if more westerns took that kind of trouble with their accuracy, I think a lot of us would be a lot happier.
I agree completely. I really enjoyed that movie myself. That's a
Yeah,
good
it's
one. I
great.
thought Brad did a great job, and it's was it Casey Affleck? Yeah, Casey
That's
Affleck.
right.
I
He
thought he did a
played Bob
phenomenal
Ford.
job.
Terrific.
Yeah,
One of, I think that was his first starring role, wasn't it? I think very,
it was
very early. Anyway,
pretty early on. Yeah,
he
no,
was
yeah,
superb in that. Very,
Re-
very good indeed.
really good movie to check out. So, tell us if anyone wants to pick up a copy of your book, Wild Billy Earp, or the other book you mentioned. Can you remind me the title of that one again?
My other,
Custer,
my one from Crockett to Custer,
Croc the Custer.
which
Okay, where's a good place for folks to pick those up?
well, you can just go online. I mean, they're all available from you know, the outlets, you know,
Yep.
Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Goodreads, you know, all the usual places. Waterstones, you can order it online, and shouldn't be a problem. From Crockett to Custer, that's specifically about the Alamo and the Little Bighorn, both areas that I've been to in great
Oh, nice.
detail, and so that's basically about those two battles and the connections I found between the two. There's quite a few connections actually, and that's by Trafford Publishing, From Crockett to Custer,
Nice.
and my Wild Billy Earp and Where to Find Him. I got a bit of a criticism about the title actually, because they thought I was being too flippant, but I made it a flippant title to draw attention to it. You know,
I love it.
Oh, well,
I
good.
absolutely
Thank
love
you.
it. And I love the illustrations. Cover doesn't
Oh.
do it justice. There's more illustrations inside the book that
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
they're done by my great friend Ross Lee. He's a fabulous artist.
That's
And,
good stuff. Well, we're gonna have to we'll have to do this again one day. Maybe we can talk more
Sure.
about Crockett and Custer and some of
Yeah.
those other characters. This was a lot of
Yeah.
fun. But
Yeah.
but I don't want to take up too much of your time. I appreciate you coming on High Plains Ramble today, and we'll do it again soon.
Well, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for your interest, Nick, and love your channel, and may it grow.